In our changing media world, consumers are becoming increasingly less willing to pay for services, and service providers are facing increasingly varied and sophisticated sources of competition. As a result, the political economy of the media on the internet is becoming increasingly dependent on data as a form of currency. But this raises the question, is data as currency a net positive or a negative for society? Specifically, let's look at how data as a currency changes the way in which the internet is produced and commodified. First of all, there are several obvious positives. With personal data being a form of currency, all members of society are granted an inalienable and equal sort of wealth. One person's data is not inherently more or less valuable than another person's, and no matter how many times your data is spent, it still retains its value. You can keep spending it. This has many implications. It radically reduces the cost of access to services like social media, search engines, and even factors into the cost and quality of goods and services. Proponents of data as currency argue that it is voluntary, driven by individual choice, and allows less wealthy or less powerful members of society to have a degree of equality of prosperity relative to elites. Also, because data is generally only valuable in a macro sense rather than in a highly individualized sense, the chances of your data being abused is reduced. Lastly, the exchange of data for improvements in price and quality is not a new phenomenon. Mid-20th century liberals were quick to point out that all economic activities involve an exchange of data of some sort. Therefore, commodification of data could be a natural improvement of the efficiency of capitalism, something that increases access to information, education, and services, making a more equal level of productivity and prosperity for all internet users. On the flip side, many critical theorists are quick to point out that the optimistic view of data as currency is problematic. First, once a user exchanges their data with a service provider, the service provider can own that data forever. They can trade it, monetize on it further, reproducing users' data in such a way as to concentrate power and wealth even further. Critics of data as currency also argue that trade is opaque and one-sided. Users have no ability to rationally determine the value of their own data, often exchanging it for services in an unfair way. The use of data as currency also means that users' data can be used in ways that the users may not have a way of fully understanding. Lastly, this model runs the risk of allowing for systems of mass surveillance and wrongdoing. Essentially, the data as currency system relies on benevolence of data holders. Corporations and governments gain access to highly personalized information which, unlike a monetary transaction, can be highly damaging in the wrong hands. What is the synthesis of these two different perspectives? Well, clearly there's give and take. While data as currency presents the opportunity for greater equality of productivity and prosperity, it presents a risk wherein service providers could gain a new sort of wealth, that is, a wealth of data, which could exacerbate existing economic stresses associated with inequality. While users choose to use services in exchange for their data, there is reason to question to what degree users truly understand the nature of the exchange, and thus whether the exchange is truly fair. Lastly, while there is a huge net benefit for users and limited perceived risk due to the way in which data is only valuable in a macro sense, this assumes that data does not get into the wrong hands or is misused by service providers. So, what is the best way forward? The competing evidence suggests that data as currency is a net positive that bears risk. In the future, users should be better educated on what their data is worth, and service providers should be compelled to provide even greater clarity on how they use data. Practices such as the right to be forgotten can help limit the control and concentration of data, and strong institutional commitment to enforce information laws and compel service providers to use data securely and fairly will help limit the risks. Like it or not, your data is a currency in the ever-changing political economy of the online media. Ultimately, there are benefits for users, but there are also risks which we must be mindful of and try to limit. Thanks for watching.